Something about today felt different the moment the headlines started circulating. Not louder, not flashier, just sharper. The kind of moment where nothing explodes, nobody shouts, and yet the consequences could be enormous. Because before Volodymyr Zelenskyy heads into a high-pressure conversation with Donald Trump, a meeting that commentators say could influence everything from Ukraine's battlefield posture to the future of Western support, he makes a move that quietly reframes the whole story. He doesn't go straight to the United States. He doesn't huddle only with his own team. He stops in Canada, and not just anywhere in Canada, Halifax, and not just to meet anyone. He sits down with Prime Minister Mark Carney. At first glance, that might sound procedural. Another diplomatic courtesy, another handshake before the main event. But here's where things get interesting. In international politics, timing is never accidental, and neither are detours.
Welcome. Thank you for taking this time, this at a crucial moment in this process. Under President Zelenskyy's leadership, we have the conditions, the possibility of a just and lasting peace. But that requires a willing Russia. And the barbarism that we saw overnight, the attack on Kyiv, shows just how important it is that we stand with Ukraine during this difficult time, and that we create the conditions for this just and lasting peace and a true reconstruction. And I want to underscore something that has happened in recent weeks, is that the development of that possibility under your leadership, and also the prospect of true prosperity for the Ukrainian people. I'll just finish with one point on Canada. We've provided military assistance, further military assistance. We're announcing today further economic assistance for Ukraine, $2.5 billion worth of economic assistance that helps unlock financing from the IMF, from the World Bank, from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, to begin this process of rebuilding. We have an important bilateral meeting and then a meeting virtually with our colleagues from the Coalition of the Will.
When a leader chooses who they see before a consequential meeting, they're signaling priorities, trust, and strategy. And in my view, this stop tells us far more than any prepared statement ever could. Zelenskyy is heading into a conversation with Donald Trump, a figure known for unconventional negotiation tactics, public pressure, and a deeply transactional approach to foreign policy. Supporters call it strength. Critics call it volatility. Either way, nobody serious in global politics pretends it's easy. So Zelenskyy pauses first to speak with someone who has spent years navigating crises, markets, and political personalities under intense pressure.
Dear Mark, Prime Minister, dear journalists, dear Canada, thank you for your support, first of all, and thanks for your words that you mentioned about this tonight attack. It was really very difficult, hard attack. Russia launched more than 500 drones and dozens of missiles. And thanks for air defense of our partner. That's not enough. And this attack is again Russia's answer on our peace efforts, and it's really it showed that Putin doesn't want peace, and we want peace. And he's the man of war, but he afraid to speak about publicly. But we see the steps, and what we need to stop this war. And we need two things: pressure on Russia and sufficient strong support for Ukraine. We'll speak about it. We will speak about air defense, and it's really last weeks we had good steps in diplomacy, but we can't live in illusion that it gives us possibility to have less air defense. With Russia it doesn't work. So thank you very much, Mark, for this meeting. We will have bilateral, and as you said, we will join our European friends, and tomorrow I will have I hope very important and very constructive meeting with President Trump.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Someone who understands how power is projected, how leverage is framed, and how calm can sometimes be the strongest move in the room. That person is Mark Carney. Let's start with something most people overlook. Zelenskyy didn't need to do this. He could have flown directly to Florida, focused on optics, and let the meeting speak for itself. He could have gone to Brussels or made calls to NATO leadership. Instead, he chose a quieter path that carries weight precisely because it isn't loud. Halifax becomes a staging ground, not for spectacle, but for alignment. From the reactions I've seen online, this caught a lot of observers off guard. Canada doesn't always dominate geopolitical headlines, especially compared to Washington, London, or Berlin. But under Carney, Canada's role has shifted in tone, if not always in volume. Carney doesn't posture. He doesn't dramatize. He communicates in a way that suggests long games, not quick wins. And that matters when the stakes involve war, peace, and the credibility of alliances. During their public remarks, Carney's message is steady and measured. He talks about the possibility of peace, but he's careful not to romanticize it. He frames peace as conditional, something that requires seriousness from Russia, not just rhetoric. Here's why that matters. In diplomatic language, that's not filler. It's a boundary. It signals support for negotiations without signaling weakness. It reassures allies while quietly warning adversaries that Canada isn't confused about what's happening on the ground. Carney also references Canada's material support for Ukraine, including military and economic assistance, and the role that support plays in unlocking broader international financing through institutions like the IMF and World Bank. He doesn't oversell it. He doesn't turn it into a victory lap. He presents it as part of a coordinated effort, which is exactly how allies want to hear it framed. Not "look at us," but here's how this fits into the larger picture. Now here's the twist. These comments aren't just for journalists standing in the room. They're signals. They travel. They get clipped, replayed, and analyzed. And yes, they reach Donald Trump. Whether people like it or not, Trump pays attention to tone, strength, and alignment. Carney's words say, without ever saying it directly, that Ukraine is supported by leaders who are calm, prepared, and not panicking. That changes the negotiating atmosphere before Zelenskyy ever takes his seat. When Zelenskyy speaks, the emotion is unmistakable. He references recent attacks, the scale of drone and missile strikes, and the human cost behind the numbers. But he also does something deliberate. He avoids sounding desperate. He emphasizes pressure and support, not illusions. He acknowledges diplomatic steps while rejecting the idea that diplomacy alone replaces defense. That balance is not accidental. It reflects a leader who knows the room he's about to enter next. Most people never realize how much these pre-meetings shape the main event. This is where narratives are sharpened. This is where leaders test language, calibrate tone, and decide which points are non-negotiable. Zelenskyy isn't just thanking Canada. He's aligning with Carney's framing, reinforcing shared language about peace, pressure, and realism. In political terms, that's synchronization. Some commentators see this as Zelenskyy seeking reassurance. Others see it as strategic theater. In my view, it's both, and that's not a contradiction. Leaders under pressure don't just need advice. They need confirmation that their approach still makes sense in a shifting global environment. Carney offers that without theatrics. He doesn't promise miracles. He offers clarity. And let's talk briefly about why Carney, specifically, matters here. Before entering politics, Carney built a reputation in financial leadership, crisis management, and international coordination. He understands systems under stress. He understands how confidence can stabilize chaos. And perhaps most relevant to this moment, he understands how figures like Trump interpret strength, not as volume, but as composure. That's where this part hits differently. Zelenskyy isn't walking into his meeting with Trump isolated or improvising. He's walking in after consulting a leader whose credibility spans markets, governments, and institutions. That doesn't guarantee outcomes. Nothing does. But it changes posture. It changes expectations. And it sends a message that Ukraine's position is supported by more than emotion. It's backed by strategy. Online reactions have been split, as you'd expect. Some applaud Canada stepping into a more visible diplomatic role. Others question whether this kind of influence is overstated. But even critics acknowledge the symbolism. When a wartime president facing one of the most consequential conversations of his leadership chooses to stop and align with you first, that's not routine, that's recognition. This fact changes the whole perspective. Halifax wasn't a detour. It was a prelude. A moment of grounding before uncertainty, a reminder that diplomacy isn't always about who speaks the loudest, but who listens, advises, and steadies the conversation before it begins. So when Zelenskyy heads into his discussion with Trump, he does so carrying more than briefing notes. He carries alignment with allies who understand both the moral stakes and the political realities. Canada, under Mark Carney, positions itself not as a bystander, but as a stabilizing force whose voice carries weight precisely because it isn't reckless. That's the story beneath the surface today. Not drama for drama's sake, but strategy unfolding quietly in real time. And those are often the moments that end up mattering most. If you found this breakdown helpful and you value thoughtful, independent political commentary, consider subscribing. I appreciate you.